Hi, I am here with Ryan Carson from the short film Sing Me to Sleep. I should get the title right. This is definitely one that stuck with me. It was extremely heart-wrenching, really intimate film of how deeply entwined we become with a loved one when they're suffering and the giving of everything of yourself in the caregiver role, but that reminder that you need to take care of yourself so you can continue that fight alongside. So a lot of really nuanced conversation and exploration of that caregiver role. But Ryan, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we have a lot to dig through. You gave such a tender, grounded performance in this film. I'd love to hear more about you and your training or your artist journey that brought you to this point.
Most definitely, yeah. I was originally born in Wilmington, Delaware, but then when I was 9 months old, my mom and I we moved out to Chicago, and so I'm pretty much a Chicago native.
Mm,
And I mean, my first experiences with acting or with acting as an art form were the musicals and plays and the movies that my parents would take me to see, and that my dad would bring over VHS, like rented VHS when we still had Blockbuster and those Hollywood video rental shops. And I just remember falling in love with the characters so much. And, I was a very sensitive kid. I still consider myself to be a very sensitive person. So there was always a great degree of empathy I would have for the characters. Even like, the villains, even I would even have empathy for the villains and sometimes actually feel bad for the villains when they would lose or something because, you can have a cognitive recognition that someone is doing something bad, and yet still on the emotional level you feel for them. So there's still sadness you feel. But anyway, I got into acting, or I started doing acting training, I want to say as early as eighth grade when I started taking drama classes, or I took a drama class in eighth grade. And then the high school I went to, New Trier High School in Winnetka, Illinois. Very, 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 very big high school and very, very well funded, being in the North Shore of Chicago,
yeah.
which is a very, very wealthy area. It had a very good acting program, and so it gave me a really good foundation for the basics of acting.
Mhm.
And it also gave me a good foundation for some writing and directing as well. I did a documentary in high school that was looking at because the high school I went to, the neighborhoods I grew up in were very homogenous, primarily white.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of friends who were in the city and were going to a high school in the city called Shy Arts. And Shy Arts is this beautiful high school on the west side of Chicago that's all built around bringing diversity to the art scene in Chicago. And so I made this documentary kind of comparing and contrasting my school with theirs. And then I went to college, and I went to college in upstate New York at Bard College, the small liberal arts school about 2 hours north of New York City and right across the bridge from Kingston, New York, about an hour south of Albany. And yeah, I studied there, and I won't lie. I mean, a lot of what I went through at Bard's classes when it came to acting felt um, kind of similar to many of the acting classes I took in high school. And so many times at Bard, I felt like I wasn't learning something new from the class or the class syllabus per se, but it was more so spaces for me to exercise my acting skills and to further develop them just by doing the thing.
Hmm.
But I did do a summer program at Stella Adler, the acting conservatory in New York City. And that was an intensive 10-week long program I did in 2019, the summer of 2019. And that was a wonderful experience. And I feel like I learned more about acting from that one summer than I did, unfortunately, with my 4 years at Bard.
Yeah.
Because when you get that conservatory training, you're getting down into the real nitty-gritty, you're getting down into the details. And that was when I was first taught how to really ask detailed questions about my characters. Beforehand, I would mostly go off of instinct and vibes, and I would still, know the basics of like, okay, well, what does my character want in this scene, all of that. But, it was when I really began to learn how to ask deep questions about my characters, how to really do that kind of investigative journalism, I call it, about your character. And yeah, so and I, was in other classes as well, improv classes. I learned how to act on camera better from that one summer. Uh,
Hmm.
but also at Bard and at high school a little bit too, because I was also very interested in filmmaking. I had a lot of friends in the film departments at my high school and at my college. So, I did also do quite a bit of acting on camera, which was really nice.
Yeah.
So I had experience coming out of college in both on camera and on stage acting, and that I think allowed me to find my way pretty quickly when I got to Chicago. Like I would just say within the first couple months of me being in Chicago, I booked a couple short film roles.
Nice.
Um, and then after that, I did a lot of theater and a couple film things here and there, and then led me up to Sing Me to Sleep, which we did last year.
That's wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
From the blockbuster VHS aisles to Stella Adler
Yeah.
to paving your path in Chicago, it feels like a very deliberate journey. And it's so important to have all of that work. And as you talk about, just important to just do the thing to understand what works and what doesn't. You have to have that basis so that when projects like this that are difficult and require a lot of you, you're prepared to step in. So
Mm.
obviously this was a really moving story, a relatable one for so many people who have gone through this. What made you want to get involved with this project?
I think it was that because, you know, being in Chicago and maybe just being in the acting world in general these days, there are a lot of, or maybe not these days, maybe it's just always been this way,
Yeah.
but just in my own experience, there are a lot of acting projects out there that feel like copies of a copy of a copy, or feel like there isn't a whole lot of emotional depth, that the writing isn't quite, what I would want to explore, that they feel kind of shallow or one-dimensional,
Yeah.
or maybe just not intriguing to me. I don't know. But I think what really drew me to this project was exactly that, was that this was going to be a very emotionally intense story. This was going to be a project that required a lot of me as an actor. There are a couple of scenes in there that really challenged me as an actor, one scene in particular. It's a little bit of a spoiler, so anybody who hasn't seen the short film yet, I won't talk too much about it, but it was a scene where I had to conjure up a lot of emotion in a setting where I, basically had to do all of it in my head. But I think that, yeah, what really drew me to this project was the fact that it was going to be a very deep story, a very powerful story, a very emotionally intense story, about these two people who love each other and how they are dealing with the inevitability of death, the finality of death, human mortality, um, and how they still hold on to each other and how they still love each other through that. Um, yeah, and so I think I was really drawn to that. I was also drawn to the music aspect of it.
Mm,
I've been playing guitar since I was a sophomore in high school, and
mm,
I've been singing since I was in fifth grade. So I've been also musically inclined for much of my life as well. And so I thought having the music aspect in that as well was also very powerful,
yeah.
uh, as a way to further convey and show the emotion and the connection between these two characters. So yeah, I think it really was just that. It was the fact that this was going to be a piece that was, much heavier, and not heavier in a way that's like trauma porn or anything
There's a
that's,
lot of that sometimes.
there is a lot of that, and I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff either, because then it's to me it's just ridiculous. Um, but it was going to be heavy in a way that was, genuinely telling a story, genuinely telling the story of these two people who are dealing with this the insurmountable obstacle of death, but
Yeah.
still finding ways to be tender with each other, as you said, and love each other through this.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that Mario, the director and the writer, based this story very much so off of his own experience with his partner, and his partner who, during the pandemic, contracted COVID and was very, very sick, and of thankfully recovered and is still with us and is still very happy and was wonderful to have on set and is a great person. But Mario conceived this project and created it from his own personal experience and his kind of his guts, you know.
Yeah.
So it had a lot of, not only was it, a story that was going to allow me as an actor to explore, and give me the permission to express those very those deeper, far more emotional parts of myself.
Hmm.
It was also a story that felt very grounded and very real, uh,
Yeah.
because it was in many ways.
Yeah.
That was something that really attracted me to it as well. This feeling that, oh, okay, this is a story that, because of that grounding, because of that realism, that believability in it, an audience member is, I think, going to be able to believe in it and hold on to it and allow themselves to open up to it
Yeah.
more, and therefore experience the emotional catharsis that is built into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think an audience can, the camera doesn't lie. An audience can spot if there's inauthenticities in any part, and it does create that distancing effect. So that makes a lot of sense that this was written from the writer's perspective and from his actual life. I think that rawness really permeated it.
Hmm.
So I'm always interested in how an actor finds their character. Some
Hmm.
people say there's a certain in, others, I think Margot Robbie always finds an animal that exemplifies her character and finds it from that outside in kind of physicality.
Hmm.
How did you find your connection to this character to make him feel real?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I mean, my process is, I think, similar yet different with all of my characters. Similar in the sense, like, I go into it always with the intention of getting to know my character, asking questions, doing that investigative journalism,
Yeah.
and really trying to treat them as a human being and using this magical ability we have as human beings to empathize with one another, and trying to uncover them that way. But it's also different because I always find myself asking new questions or coming at it from a different angle, or sometimes, I'll refer to the character as myself. Like, as I'm writing notes in my script, I will say, like, I feel this, I feel that, I do this, I want that. And other times I'll refer to my character in the third person to kind of distance myself from them and, allow myself to see them more fully, before I try and, like, put myself in them. With Mark, I won't lie, I did do quite a bit of analysis on the script, but not as much as I normally did.
Mm,
And what I kind of did with Mark was, I simplified it a bit, where I just, throughout the entire film, my goal was keep her alive, keep her
yeah.
alive, keep her alive, keep her alive. And
Hmm.
what that did was, of course, number one, really give me something to fight for. But I think what it also did is, highlight highlight the finality, or the magnitude of what these characters were facing in this story. Again, the insurmountable obstacle of death. But that even with the recognition that that obstacle is insurmountable, there's still this level of, I think, denial that Mark felt, and this level of, no, 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 I can do this. I can make this happen. I can keep her here with me. Um, and so I approached it from that angle, that this was a man who did not want to lose the most important person in his life, and was going to do what he had to, or what he could, to keep her alive and to make sure that she stayed with him as long as she possibly could. Um, and so I approached Mark from that angle. And I got to know him as a character. I resonate with those feelings of not wanting someone to leave. And so I explored it from that angle. Another question I tend to ask my characters, or another investigative question I tend to explore with all my characters, is I try to ask the question of what hurt them or what has hurt them and what has brought them to who they are today. I'm also very interested in mental health studies and trauma studies. I'm a very big fan of Dr. Gabor Mate,
Mm,
who
nice.
is this, yeah, Hungarian Hungarian MD. He's a medical doctor, but he specializes in trauma research and childhood development and how those things coalesce and come together. And this idea that oftentimes we are what has hurt us, or what has hurt us has a very big impact on who we become and who we are.
Hmm.
And so I approached Mark with that, and I kind of asked some questions around, well, Mark, at least the way I portrayed Mark, the way I approached Mark, being in this kind of state of, and Mario and I talked about this as well when we were talking about the character of being in this state of denial that no, this is not going to happen. No, I'm not going to lose this person.
Mm,
Begs the question, okay, well, did Mark lose someone or something in his past that he doesn't want to allow that to happen again, which is why he is so fervently trying to protect his wife from this inevitable outcome.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I think overall, like I was able to pick up on Mark pretty quickly, and Mario definitely helped me pick up on Mark pretty quickly as well. Mario said, again, he wrote this piece from his own perspective, so he
Yeah.
had a lot of insight on the character. And so he was a great help in helping me to understand Mark and where he wanted Mark to come from in the piece. And once I understood that, it was very much so, like I said earlier, kind of just playing that one objective throughout the entire piece of we're going to keep her alive. We're going to keep her alive.
Yeah, I feel like that drive uh, definitely pushed through the scenes, and it was a lovely antithesis to her trying to find more of the joy or pushing
Yeah,
it down or the denial of the situation, so much so that it obviously pushes her too much physically, and her body makes her aware of
right,
the realities of the situation.
right.
And I think that was, yeah, that was very much clear. I also thought what really sold this piece and sold the story to me was that very authentic chemistry that you two had.
Mhm.
We had to believe in this couple. We had to believe the shared history. And I wondered, how did you two find that bond on camera? Were there specific conversations or exercises that got you there?
Not really. I'm trying to remember if we did any specific exercises to help us get into the moment or anything like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe if you have done the interview with Dina or do the interview with Dina, Dina would know better than me or remember
Yeah.
better than me. Um, I think that Dina is a very, very talented actor, and I really enjoyed working with her. And I think that both her and I just allowed ourselves to be emotionally open and vulnerable during this whole process. And I definitely owe a lot of that safety, or that feeling of safety that then allows one the room to open up. I owe that a lot to Mario and to the other folks on set who were just incredibly gracious and incredibly generous and incredibly kind and super professional, super, super professional. There were never any fights. There was never any drama on set. They were all very, very professional. And so I think that it was a combination of, Dina and I's own emotional openness and our own vulnerability, and just allowing ourselves to be present with each other during the scenes,
Mhm.
um, along with the very, I would say, open and welcoming atmosphere we had on set that kind of came together to, again, give us the room to open up and be present with each other in the ways that we were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in daily life, it's hard enough to just be open and present with somebody. So to have an active practice of that definitely reads as something uh, more than the ordinary, for sure. So
Mhm.
you brought up the role of music in this piece. I thought that was lovely that you've played guitar all your life because that did feel like a very natural extension of your character.
Mhm.
And the music in the piece really did seem like what he couldn't share in words, but also that, yeah, that true spirit of their relationship, of their bond, and that life force.
Mhm.
Um, and her encouraging him to continue playing, I thought was a really lovely aspect.
Mhm.
There was also on the end, the juxtaposition to that is there was a lot of silence in
Mhm.
some of the scenes, and it felt like this almost powerful other character, this palpable presence of the loneliness or the things that they couldn't quite say, those two different drives bumping up against to each other. And I wondered, was there any talks about this? Was there any conversations about allowing the space for silence?
Mhm. Yeah, I think there were definitely conversations around that once it came to post-production. Like I was there was one night where I got together with Mario and some of the crew, and we had dinner together, and then they invited me over to Mario's apartment, which was just around the corner, to see a rough cut of the film. And we talked about, I mean, with short films and film festivals, there's always the question of time and how long is the film going to be, and how do we cut it down so that it makes the festival and all that. But there were conversations about how to let specific moments breathe, and
Mm,
we were, they did talk about how, in those moments where we were interacting as characters or there was dialogue, or the scenes where I would be playing music, that, you know, those moments would be a little bit not quicker. I think that when it came down to the editing, they edited those scenes so that they were really sharp and really did their job
yeah.
as quickly as they needed to be, to allow there to be that space for those silent scenes to really breathe and really draw out. Like there's that scene where Dina is, it's her first time home from the hospital. And, she's flipping through the get well cards from her students. She's just looking around the apartment. She sees Mark's guitar in the corner that's, all dusty. It says to her that he hasn't been playing for a while. And then, she sees Mark in the other room fiddling with this hospital bed. And then she goes up to him and talks to him. So yeah, there were conversations about how to just, again, going back to this idea of being present, how to just be present and let the silence speak for itself. And I think that for Mark as a character, the silence was very scary. So when Mark was on camera much of the time, I portrayed him as being a little manic, a little frantic, a little like, again, the singular goal, keep her alive, keep her alive, keep her alive. That completely giving of himself over to just taking care of her. And in a way, trying to make noise while doing that, or as much noise as he could while doing that, as a way to escape from the silence.
Mm,
Because the silence, when you're sitting in silence, oftentimes that's when the truth comes to you. And, he didn't want to acknowledge the truth, again, the inevitability of his wife's passing. So I think that for him, the only time he really sits in silence, I would say, would be at the very beginning of the piece and at the very end of the piece. And both of those moments are very difficult moments for him uh,
mhm.
in the story. And so I think that for him, the silence was quite scary. And so I, again, played him and portrayed him as trying to keep the silence away as much as possible. Whereas Dina's character was, I think, far more comfortable with the silence and far more accepting of the inevitability of what was going to happen. And I think, for her, much of her journey was about, okay, how do I get my husband to accept this? No.
Yeah, and be okay with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Lovely. And that's interesting thinking about the first time we see them is you playing music in the hospital. and there's the sound of the beeping and all of the hustle and bustle of the hospital, which is that hustle and bustle of keeping people alive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, in terms of when you saw the final product of the film, final product, when you
Right.
saw the final cut of the film, what were your reactions?
Mm. I was it's interesting. Like watching myself, I do get uncomfortable. I think that it's the reaction I have is, oh boy, I'm about to see myself in like some uncomfortable situations. I'm about to see myself in some emotional situations, vulnerable situations too.
Mhm.
And so there's also uncomfortability that arises from that, I think. But I was, very, very impressed by Adrian's editing and Mario's direction and all of it. I mean, the shots looked beautiful. The lighting was always great. And the editing, like I said, was really wonderful too. Again, like I was saying with your previous question, those moments where there was dialogue happening were great and quick and snappy, but also at the same time weren't rushed. And then those moments of silence were really allowed to breathe and play out, and just we were allowed as the audience to be there in those moments and let the silence kind of wash over us and deliver. Those were the moments I think too where like again the emotional weight was really hitting in those moments of silence. Um, yeah, I mean, I am a very nitpicky actor. Like I will look at myself and be like, maybe I should have done better with that. Okay, I can see what I was trying to do there, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, I had a great time watching it. I did think that it was some of my better acting that I've done before. Again, it was a very challenging acting project.
Yeah.
Um, and David Bowie has a great quote in an interview where he talks about how he uses the analogy of a swimming pool, and that for him, artists should be in the area of the swimming pool where your your tippy toes are just touching the bottom, but you're still having to work to keep your head up. And for me, that's what this film felt like. It felt like something I definitely could do, but it was going to take effort for me to do it,
Yeah.
and challenge me to do it. And so that was, the pride I felt while watching it, was the pride of like, okay, it was a challenge, but I met the challenge, and I think I did okay. So yeah.
Absolutely. I would I would mirror those. You did mirror.
Yeah.
Okay. When actors say that they like watching themselves, I'm always very skeptical. Don't understand that, but
Yeah.
all the power to them. And in terms of it's hard to see it on your own, but hearing usually others' reactions, I help feel softens the blow. What
Mhm.
what were other audience reactions that you might have heard?
Well, I had a couple friends in the audience, and so
Mhm.
during the scenes where like Dina's character and I were flirting on camera or making some innuendos. There's the scene where we go out to dinner with each other, and there's a lot of flirting that happens in that scene. My friends were in the back of the audience, like making noises and giving me shit. So that was fun. If not a little, embarrassing, but it was fun. Um, but I mean, the audience reaction, I think, was I could really feel that it resonated with people. I could really feel that it impacted people, and that it left a mark on them and really left them thinking,
Yeah.
and also feeling as well. So I think that we did a little Q&A sessions after the screening. We did two screenings at the Music Box Theater over the summer, and yeah, I mean, again, the sense that I got from people was that it resonated with them, and that they really did feel what these two people were going through,
Mhm.
and that it landed with them in a way where even if they hadn't gone through something similar, they could still feel the weight of what these characters are going through. And I actually did. I forget the gentleman's name, and I forget his relation to the project in terms of like some of his family worked on it. I forget. But there was a gentleman in the theater, in the lobby afterwards who uh, uh, came up to me and said, "You did a wonderful job." Um, and I think he thanked me for it too, because he had a very similar experience to Mark in the film, that his wife had passed away before her time as well, and that he had gone through a very similar experience of trying to take care of her, trying to hold on to her as much as he could, and really trying to keep her there, really trying to just keep her alive, and make sure that she stayed with him. And the Sisyphean battle against death, of trying to keep death away when it's the ultimate inevitability for all of us.
Yeah.
So he really felt the film, and it was really wonderful to talk to him again. I wish I could remember his name, and I wish I could remember his relation to the project, but that was really powerful to hear someone who had gone through the same experience come up to me, congratulate me, thank me, and he and I talked about Mark a little bit, and I told him, like, yeah, my main goal throughout the film was just to try to keep her alive, and he nodded and said, yeah, that was my main goal too, with his wife. So that was very powerful. And it's always, I mean, I've always felt that whenever I've made something or I've acted in something, when someone says thank you, it's like the best compliment you can get. Not thank you in the sense of like, a pretentious way where like, oh, you're so great. Thank you for gracing us with your presence or anything like that. But thank you in the sense that, you told a story that somebody needed to hear, or you told
Yeah.
a story that really impacted someone, and that really moved them and really touched them in a way that maybe they needed to be moved or needed to be touched, or helped them, how should I say? You help them feel seen, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It
Yeah.
very much is that reflecting back that my experience matters.
Yes.
See
Yeah.
it put up there. We always think of like the screen as the ultimate way of living. And sometimes in the mundane of life, we forget like that this is our story, right? We are the main character, and reminding to stay present with that, that
Mhm.
it matters. Yeah. Yeah, what a gift. That's well, if that man is listening today, thank you for your comment, sir.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
wonderful. I feel like I could talk to you all day, Ryan. That was really thoughtful and insightful. And do you have any projects coming up on the horizon that you're?
Not acting. I am working on another documentary. I'm working on a documentary right now with a Palestinian friend of mine. They actually came over from, I mean, right now with what's happening in Palestine, and they came over. They're originally from Haifa, and they started filming the protests here in Chicago. Chicago is home to the largest Palestinian community here in the U.S. And so they started filming the protests, and they started working on a documentary about the diaspora and the community here in Chicago. And I've been getting involved in community organizing. One of my big passions is also social justice and community service.
Mm,
And so they and I met, and I reached out to one of the other folks who's working on the documentary, and I told her that I have experience with working on documentaries, and this is a cause I care about, and so I would love to be on board and be of service to this project in whatever way that I can. So now I'm working on that documentary. The documentary, for anybody who's listening and is interested, is called Shatat. Shatat is the Arabic word for diaspora.
mm,
And you can go online. We have a website. It is Shatat Doc, so DOC at
mm.
the end.com. You can check out the website. We have a teaser up for it right now, and right now we're just trying to secure funding
Yeah,
to finish the project. So if
that
any
age-old
production,
battle.
yeah, exactly. So if any production companies are listening, help us out. Uh,
Absolutely.
but
So
that's
hopefully
that.
that we can chat about that on another
Most
day as
definitely.
well. I'd love to hear how that journey's going.
Yeah, most definitely. Most
Thank
definitely.
you. Thank you so much, Ryan. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and I definitely encourage anybody to go out, check out "Sing Me to Sleep" because it is definitely one that I think would resonate with pretty much anybody. And I think we all need a little bit of a chance to sit, pay attention, and have our empathy evoked once in a while.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah,
agree. I
really
mean,
lovely.
empathy to me is, the main reason that we as human beings have survived as long as we have, and is one of our main, one of our greatest powers. And empathy is so important at a time like this, where, again, we see the horrors that are unfolding in Palestine and Gaza and the West Bank. We see what is happening in our own country with the rise of authoritarianism. We see what is happening around the world, how there's so much inequality. And so, I think that empathy and any kind of art that can awaken our empathy, any kind of art that can break our heart just a little bit to let the light shine in, um, you know, uh, uh, is very important. And we need to prioritize and protect that kind of art and protect that kind of work. So I agree. Empathy is our most powerful tool, and it's something that we need to continuously cultivate and need to continuously strengthen. So any kind of art that strengthens and opens our empathy is very needed at this time.
Absolutely. Let's keep on fighting the strong artist fight.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ryan. And we'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you, Hannah. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.